on into the Utah Blockcast. I'm Steve Bartle, Utah insider for KSL Sports. Doing our Thursday episode. Bennett, how you doing, brother?
I'm good. I'm good now that we're most of the way through the week, past hump day. It's always a long week when you lose a game. So just excited to get out to Morgantown and watch this team bounce back.
Yeah, I think this is a big game. And so with this, before we dive into everything with this episode, so this is going to be in place of our live episode. I'm going to be traveling Thursday night when we've landed on doing our live episodes. So this is in place of that. So this is going to be a bit of our game preview type of episode. And we'll run through the matchup between Utah and West Virginia. But no live. This is in place of the live. We're still going to do a space, which Bennett is going to run the point on, as he always does. So still be looking for that. But I'll be in the air throughout the night and hopefully landing in time to catch the tail end of the space. So looking forward to that. But yeah, this is going to be our Thursday episode. So again, with this matchup, week 5, Utah versus West Virginia, a first for Utah, making the trip out to Morgantown. This is a game that I think a lot of Utah fans are going to be traveling to, and there's going to be a ton of interest. A lot of Utah fans making the trip out there, and certainly a lot of intrigue around this matchup, with this being the first contest between each program since 2017 and only the third overall. And again, the first trip to Morgantown. So, we're both going to be out there. So Ben, I'd be curious, man, just what are you looking forward to most getting out to Morgantown? One of the top, college towns in the country.
Yeah, Morgantown's always been a bucket list stadium for me. Never thought that I'd get to watch our Utah Utes play in that, but it should be good. I know that West Virginia is coming off a pretty good beatdown. But I mean, it's still Morgantown. It's still West Virginia. This is the main event in their state. Looking forward to them singing Country Roads in the beginning. Before every game, they sing it. They only sing it after the game if they win. So I'm hoping to only hear it once. But yeah, just really excited to see one of the elite college towns and check a bucket list stadium and experience off my bucket list.
Yeah, this is a big one. And not just because it's the first time Utah is traveling out to Morgantown. Obviously, for both programs, started Big 12 conference play last week, unfortunately with a loss. Utah obviously losing to Texas Tech at home 34-10. Meanwhile, West Virginia took the loss to Kansas 41-10. And so this is going to be an important one for both programs looking to get into the win column in conference play. This is certainly an opportunity for Utah when you look at the injury report and how West Virginia has unfortunately been kind of bitten by the injury bug. This is certainly an opportunity for Utah to get right in many ways. With a game against a program that is going to be competitive and is going to be tough. It's not going to be easy. Utah can't just walk into Morgantown and expect to win, but this is the sort of game that, can help you get right in many ways in terms of getting back to a level of execution, staying healthy, getting into the bye week. And so that's going to be important for Utah going into this one, is getting back to building some confidence going into the bye week after an unfortunate, contest last week where you didn't play up to your best. This is the sort of game that can help you kind of find some answers and fine tune some things going into the bye week.
Yeah, and it's an important one as you go into the bye week. Utah has to feel good, right? It can't be a situation where Utah's sitting on this for a couple weeks and you can't get beat by Texas Tech twice. It's a leave no doubt opportunity for Utah to go out there and get right, as you've said. That'll go a long ways for the team heading into the bye week. It'll go a long way for the fan base heading into the bye week. and gives you a chance to come out of the bye week against a tough opponent in Arizona State with a little bit of buzz and a little bit of excitement, a little bit of confidence. So, big game for Utah on Saturday.
Yeah, so big one, and we're gonna break it all down. We're gonna run through some of the matchups, some of the storylines, and all that. But to start this one, we actually want to start with a little Q&A. We got some questions from some of the blockheads, and so excited to hit those. So let's run through a quick Q&A before we dive into the meat and potatoes of the episode.
Yeah, first questions from Babushka. Upon review, do you think Saturday was more caused by bad execution or bad game planning, offensively speaking?
I think the primary issue for Utah against Texas Tech on Saturday was poor execution. I think that was an issue across the board, across a handful of positions. I think a number of groups just didn't play up to the level that they needed to, and and that's not to excuse the play calling or the game plan. There's certainly some things that I'm sure Beck would adjust and try to incorporate a little bit more, right? But I do think it was still a game plan that uh, would have worked had Utah executed, had they avoided, some of the mistakes that they had, particularly in that first half. Going back that first half in particular, it just felt like Utah was starting to find a rhythm, and then boom, a fumble, right? And then again, they get the ball back. The Teo Johnson interception, you get a couple plays, you start moving the ball, and then boom, another fumble. And it just felt like Utah was getting in their own way of establishing a rhythm and sort of grabbing hold of the momentum. So I think again, and it's not to boil it down to the turnovers and the penalty, like we've talked about quite a bit already. There's plenty of other instances where execution wasn't what it needed to be, but those plays speak to the issue the most, and I think that is kind of where I fall on it. I would say probably 75-25 in terms of what could have made the difference for Utah: better execution versus better game planning. I think execution was the big thing for Utah.
Yeah, and I don't need to take too long because I feel like you answered that mostly spot on as far as how I would. There's stuff that you can say about some of the game plan, but overall the opportunities were there. The execution in some crucial moments, it was not there. You look at the fumbles, you look at the interceptions, you look at the penalties, you look at the blocks that were missed on the outside. Um, it felt like an execution thing. It felt like the opportunities were there for Utah to capitalize, but the execution again just wasn't there.
Yeah, I agree. All right, next question. I'll ask this one. This one from Hypno Ute. What is the Rubicon for the season? What benchmark will dictate a failed season or a successful season?
Yeah, I feel like coming into the season, the bar for Utah was to get to Arlington, and in a lot of ways, still is. That's the product of the recent success Utah has seen. When you get to the Pac-12 championship over and over again, it starts to become the norm and the expectation. So it's totally fair for that to still be a benchmark. Would I consider it a failed season if Utah didn't get to Arlington? Would like to see something along the lines of how BYU and Colorado, they missed Arlington but put together pretty solid seasons. They had 2 conference losses. So did the teams that actually played in Arlington. So if Utah's to miss Arlington, I'd need to see it be like that to not feel totally let down. But I think a 9-3 season is still nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like I said all off season, right? My prediction for this season was an 8-4, 9-3 type of year. And if you get the plays If you get progress from certain individuals, plays made by individuals, certain bounces going your way, that can get you to 10, 11 wins. And so this is kind of where I'm still at with this team. We didn't get those plays. We had some bounces against Texas Tech, or Utah had some bounces, but also had a number of bounces go the opposite way. And so, yeah, I'm with you there. I think 9-3 is kind of the bar in terms of that Rubicon, right? And so I think that's the mark. I'm with you there.
Yeah, we got one from West G. Do you think the staff knew John Henry Daly would be a monster after fall camp and were playing coy with the media? Or is this a genuine surprise even after fall camp?
Yeah, I think they knew. I think they had an idea of what John Henry Daly was going to be this season. It was interesting, in fall camp particular. I remember a number of conversations where it was, it was all the talk was about Cash Dillon. It was about Lance Holzclaw and those guys. And John Henry Daly, he was like, he's had a nice camp, but it was never like he's going to be the guy. He's going to be the starter. And that was, across a handful of conversations, but I think it was mostly Utah being pretty cool. I think they had an idea given the burst at the snap, his motor. There were indicators I'm sure that they saw where they knew. And again, in fall camp, you're going up against two really good offensive tackles, right? So I'm sure they had a pretty good idea of what they had in that group.
Yeah, I'm going to take Wes's question one step further. How about Jackson Benny? Think
Ooh,
I
I
look at
think
those two as the biggest surprises. What are your thoughts on Jackson Benny?
Yeah, I mean, the conversation started with Benny back in spring ball, right? Like, unfortunately now Rabbit Evans is injured, but beyond Rabbit, a lot of the talk on that defense side of the ball was around Jackson Benny and sort of his emergence in that defensive secondary. So I think Utah felt optimistic, and there's still a lot of things that Benny needs to improve on, right? He needs to tighten up, on the play to play, down to down type of coverage stuff. But in terms of his playmaking and what he's brought there, capitalizing on those opportunities, that's been a pleasant surprise for us. Probably not so much for the coaches, but for us certainly.
Okay. Next question. Big Wheeze 77. Do you anticipate Utah will utilize more design throws outside the pocket for Dampier?
I know that I would. I know that I would try to get Dampier out of the pocket on the move, right? In some of those rollouts and sprint outs and that sort of thing. That was an element of Beck's offense last year, was getting him out into those designed mobile pockets, right? Having an escort out there with him and that type of thing, because it also becomes the sort of thing where if nothing's there, he's got a lead blocker out in front of him and he can use his legs. So I anticipate that being something that we see. I don't know how soon or if we'll see it for certain. I don't know, but I anticipate that being something that we see at some point this season.
Yeah, and this is something we touched on in the space on Monday night. Said we like to see more of that. He just feels a lot more comfortable when he's moving around. He doesn't like standing still. You can watch pretty much every one of his dropbacks, and he likes to move around. You think of the play that I think of is he starts to take off like he's going to run, and then that pulls in a guy that's right there covering Bentley's space, and that opened the big play for the touchdown drive for Utah. So would like to see some of that too, like act like he's going to take off and then quick dump
Yep.
and see what can happen there. So
That is another thing that was pretty prominent in Beck's offense last year with Dampier, was sort of that, you know, designed QB run RPO type look where he gives that little power fake, right? And then pulls up and throws it over the top of the defense. So there's still things that they can do and bring into the playbook that I think will emphasize the threat of Dampier and the run game. So we'll see. Next one, I've got the next question here. This one from Ragnar Ute. Obviously, we saw the defense run out of steam about 8 minutes too soon. Hypothetically, if Lander, Smith, and Benny aren't taking snaps on offense, do you think the defense has enough juice to hold on another series or two?
Yeah, I think snap count hasn't been an issue for these guys. I know that's monitored pretty closely. They're not getting Travis Hunter levels of usage.
Right.
So I would say no. That's also, three guys on the defense. It's a lot more than that. Uh, with that being said, I I'd like to see them be more prominent on the defensive side of the ball. Benny is maybe who I like the most to play two ways. I think he stretches the field in ways that we really need. As far as Lander goes, obviously you lose Hunter Andrews in the tight end room, so you get a little thinner there. But I could see Lander making sense, but interested to see who steps up there. I know Otto Tia has been a name that's been thrown around. Be interested to see if JJ starts getting looks at that position again. But starting to go off the beaten path with the question, my answer is no. I don't think that them focusing solely on defense would have given the defense enough juice to hold on another series or two.
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? I think there's so much more than going on in those final 8 minutes than just those three, and those three having the extra juice to get it done, right? I think that's kind of the point here is it was the entire defense. It wasn't just those three. Lander played 74 snaps defensively, 14 snaps on offense. He led the way in terms of snap count for the team. Smith only played 57 snaps on defense, 14 on offense. And then Benny played 48 and 11 defense offense. So still, with Snowden and Benny, they're keeping that snap count pretty low. With Lander, he's getting some work, and maybe that's an area that could have benefited Utah having Lander, without those 14 additional snaps. But I don't think I don't think those snaps alone make the difference in the final 8 minutes. Maybe it makes a difference on a play or two, and that sort of thing. But yeah, I don't know that it makes that big of a difference where you're eliminating, a touchdown drive or two or whatever whatever it ends up being over the final three. I don't think it makes that big of a difference. All right, let's dive into the game now. Let's look ahead to West Virginia, some of the key storylines here, and then some of the matchups that we're going to be looking at. So, with this game again, like I mentioned, both teams are actually coming off a loss in week 4, the first conference game for both programs, and this is a bounce back opportunity for both teams. And Utah in particular, given the stage that they were on last week and the unfortunate result on the field with that 34-10 loss, I think this is really, really important, really, really vital for Utah to have a resounding response, after last week's result. And Whittingham's program, they've typically done a pretty good job of, bouncing back after losses, but last year taught us that you can't just take it for granted. Right. So this is a game that Utah can't just walk into Morgantown, even with the injury list that the Mountaineers are currently dealing with. You can't just expect to go in there and get a comfortable win. Utah has to go into that stadium, into Morgantown, and put their best foot forward. And I think that's going to be the key. I want to see a quick start. I want to see a strong response in terms of the execution for Utah and how clean they are. I think that's going to be a key storyline going into this game is what sort of response do we see from Utah and even West Virginia on the other side of the ball.
Yeah, another thing that interested in seeing is just not seeing, but something that's necessary is that fan mindset reset. So, we all know that the players and the coaches, they catch what goes on social media, and there's small segments of the fan base that are still dragging feet, but I think overall the fans have been really good about moving on from last week's frustrations and focusing on what's ahead. When we run the post game, and we get into the space, and you start hearing from Utah fans, and little bit of sky is falling on Saturday, which is natural after a loss, especially with the offensive woes Utah has seen the last couple of years. A lot of people feeling like that's back, and then you get into the space on Monday, and you start talking with the fans, and they start to sing a little bit of different tune as they digest that loss, and they start to see that that's one game against potentially, as it stands right now, the best team in the Big 12, and you start to realize, hey, Utah was down by 3 points with 8 minutes to go. Utah had plenty of opportunities to be in that game, take that game. It felt like it was there for the taking the whole time, and dwelling on Texas Tech isn't going to help anything. We have now Utah's moving into West Virginia, and it's an opportunity to get right, get back on track, and go into the bye week 4-1, come out with an opportunity against a good Arizona State team, and you start rattling off wins, and you forget about things pretty quickly. If Utah sits at, it all starts this week with rattling off wins. If Utah's able to get 3 in a row here, and they're sitting at 6-1 after the Utah BYU game in Provo, I think everybody in the fan base would be okay with that 6-1 mark. So everything's still in front of Utah, and it's important to keep that in mind and to keep that mindset, because again, the overall fan sentiment, that's going to leak into the locker room, and the players and the coaches, they see that, they feel that, they feed off of that. So overall, though, good to see Utah fans pulling it together.
Yeah, and again, I think the response this week from Utah, I think, will play a big role in terms of the vibes, for the fans and the fan base and all of that, in sort of reinstilling some optimism and confidence in this team moving forward. And then the final thing here, obviously, is going to be the spotlight on the quarterback position, and for very different reasons, right? With West Virginia, they're dealing with pretty significant injury news with Nico Marchiol and sort of his foot injury and what he's dealing with. What is that position going to look like with Jalen Henderson potentially being the guy to lead the Mountaineers this weekend, and then with Devin Dampier, obviously. Again, going back to last week, the spotlight was on Utah. It was on Dampier, and he didn't have his best game. And I think obviously, we've now now officially learned that there was an injury that kept Dampier out of practice last week. That probably played a role in how he performed on Saturday. It does sound like he's in a better place with his injury, and it sounds like he has practiced. And I'm curious what sort of impact that is going to have. So there's going to be a spotlight, on Dampier and on this quarterback position in this game, and I think that's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out this week. And again, we're going to talk a lot about Dampier and sort of the matchup here, but I think that's going to be an interesting one to monitor this weekend. So let's now that we've gotten through the storylines, let's get through some of the stats and the matchups here with this contest, because, again, looking at these two programs, I think there's some interesting matchups, to say the least. So let's start first with Utah's offensive line versus this West Virginia defensive front. And Ben, I'd be curious just to get your thoughts on the offensive line, obviously coming off, not their best performance against Texas Tech, but how do you feel about the line going into this game and sort of your expectations for this group?
Yeah, I think the offensive line's got a bit of a challenge going against that West Virginia defensive front in terms of a pass rush. West Virginia has 13 sacks on the season. So That's good enough. That ties them for 14th in the country, but they're 3 sacks behind the leaders. So they do get pressure, they do get home, and that's going to be a challenge for Utah. We saw some of that with the Utah offensive line last week against Texas Tech. Talented front seven, was able to get home, was able to cause havoc. So it's that's the biggest question mark there. And if Utah's able to rise to the occasion, the offensive line's able to not be as shaky as they were against Texas Tech, that's going to give Dampier more confidence, and we're going to be able to do more. So just hoping to see some improvement against a defensive front that's just, they're not pushovers.
Yeah, yeah, and with this West Virginia defensive front, they don't have the first guy off the bus type of body types, right? The really impressive bodies. Um, they've got some athletes, they've got dudes that fit the position, but it's really this scheme. It's this 3-3-5 stack scheme where they're trying to get penetration, they're shooting gaps, they're slanting, they're stunting, they're doing a lot schematically to create openings. And this is going to present a unique challenge that, we didn't see a lot of against Texas Tech. That was really just a lot of mano-y-mano. Uh, Guy lined up across from you, and it's you on, one-on-one essentially is what that was last week. This one is going to be a bit more of a challenge mentally. And so I'm really curious to see how Utah's offensive line handles a lot of these stunts and twists and slants and all of that. This West Virginia front, they do a good job of generating pressure. Texas Tech leads the conference in pressures generated so far with 59. West Virginia is number 2 with 58. So I think that says a lot about this defensive front on the in the pass rush. They've got a couple guys that are in the top 15 in the conference in sacks, with Chase Wilson, a linebacker, Edward Vesterinen. He's I think he's from Finland or something. He's from somewhere European. Yeah, he's from Helsinki. He's a guy, big 6'2", 280-pound type kid. And then Hammond Russell is another guy, 6'3", 212. And each of those guys have at least 2 sacks. Chase Wilson with 3 sacks. So they're going to disrupt a lot of things. They're going to create a lot of confusion, get into the backfield, shooting gaps and that sort of stuff. And that's going to present, an interesting challenge for this group. But I think this is a group where Utah, as long as they come sharp and ready to go, this is a group that Utah can sort of establish their ground game against. And we saw that last week with Kansas, taking advantage of some of that aggressiveness with the option attack as well. And I think that is sort of the formula. But I am curious to see how this group holds up, in pass protection, because this is going to be kind of a unique challenge schematically.
Yeah, the pass pro is the question mark. The run blocking, that should be there for Utah. You already touched on that. Kansas ran for 242 yards on them.
Yep.
Was able to push some bodies around. Would love to see Utah be able to get back to some of that, and be able to get the bread and butter that they've had through the first 3 games. Get back on track with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a good point there. Let's get to the next matchup. And I think this is going to be a key one for Utah's, is the Utah wide receivers versus this West Virginia secondary. And Bennett, I'd be curious just to get your thoughts on, Ryan Davis and this supporting cast around him in that wide receiver room.
Yeah, Ryan Davis has been a stud. He's been very reliable. Obviously leads the way as far as receiving goes for Utah. Need to see some more people step up in that wide receiver room. I think Tobias Merriweather has had some opportunities. He's started to help stretch the field. He's getting some of that separation and finding himself open. Need to give. I'd love to see him get more chances. Maybe throw some of those jump balls his way and let him find a groove. This
Yeah.
would be a game that I'd love to see him find some of that. And then we'll see where else guys step up, because you need more than two dudes in that wide receiver room. I do think that we'll continue to see a healthy dose of Dallin Bentley. I would like to see more Dallin Bentley. Um, but but yeah, I mean that's still a room that very much has some question marks uh, for Utah, and it'll be interesting to see who else gets involved, and who's able to step up and help Dampier and the offense out.
Yeah, and on the other side of the ball is this West Virginia secondary, and with the Mountaineers, they've actually done a really good job of taking the ball away. They have 6 takeaways so far through 4 games, and it's largely due to this defensive secondary and what they're doing. In coverage, they've got, I believe it's 4 interceptions so far this season, and are just doing a good job of sort of, uglying things up in coverage with this group. And yeah, they've got four interceptions. Darian Lewis, the safety, has 2. And then a couple linebackers, Chase Wilson and Ben Cutler, each have 1 as well. So, this is going to be an interesting one in terms of, what we see in coverage for Utah. Again, it looks like West Virginia is going to concede a lot in, on the ground, and that's going to be where Utah needs to emphasize things. But given the conversation around Devin Dampier and the passing attack, it is going to be vital that Utah gets something going beyond Ryan Davis and even beyond Dallin Bentley, that they find some answers beyond those two going into this, in this game and coming out of it going into the bye week. So, in terms of, what West Virginia has, they've got Jason Chambers, who's, a pretty stingy cornerback. They've got Jordan Scruggs, the other cornerback, and then they play 3 safeties on the field as well. So that's kind of their 3-3-5, is 2 corners and 3 safeties, and it's pretty unique. And so they've got a couple guys, Kikarura Tarnu. Man, I should have practiced these names before trying to say them. But they've got some guys that can do some things in coverage. So this is going to be a challenge. But I'm with you, Bennett. I think this is really important for Utah to find some answers, in the passing game with this group in particular. Next matchup, West Virginia's run game versus the Utah front 7. And this is going to be a really interesting one because West Virginia, they've lost a couple running backs. The headliner there is Jaheim Wright, who, he was a guy that I voted for all conference. He was on the all conference preseason team for me. He was injured, I believe, in week 2 for loss for the season with the season-ending injury. And then, lo and behold, Ty Edwards emerged as kind of this big-time back for Pitt, ran for 141 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Panthers, and really was the key to West Virginia getting the win in the backyard brawl. But now he's sort of dealing with an injury. He was listed as questionable for the matchup on the initial injury report this week. So, there's not a lot of clarity in terms of who are going to be the guys, in this run game. But one thing I think there's kind of some intrigue around is the quarterback and Jalen Henderson and what sort of impact he can have, on the ground in the run game within this Rich Rod, offense. And he is a much better athlete than Nico Marchiol or Marchiol. And I think that is going to be an interesting dynamic, is accounting for Jalen Henderson, the quarterback, and making sure to limit him as well. So there's some question marks around the running backs, but I think there's some optimism from West Virginia's side of things with how Henderson fits in this option attack. And I think that's going to be a key element for Utah to hone in on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that when you look at Utah's front going against that West Virginia run game, Jalen Henderson is really what that's the question for me coming into this. Is Utah going to be able to contain some of that? I think back to the Will Hammond 32-yard quarterback run that really broke Utah's back last week, and need to make sure that Utah's paying respect to the quarterback run game, because when Jalen Henderson came in last week against Kansas, he ran all over them and got, the first touchdown of the game, albeit the game was over at that point. It was a lot to a little. We're into the fourth quarter at that point, but still, I mean, he was able to run it really well. And if Utah's able to contain that, that's going to bode well for the Utah defense. As far as the run game in and of itself, it's another challenge. The West Virginia is averaging about 220 yards per game on the ground, which is good for fourth in the Big 12. They've got a strong run game that does play into Utah's defense's strength, but a nice little test just to give us one of those "Are we who we thought we are" moments. Are we who we thought we were moments?
Are we who we thought we were? Yeah. That sounds good. Yeah. And then to while we're talking Jalen Henderson, obviously he is kind of dynamic as a runner, and I think that was clear. That was evident in the limited opportunities he had against Kansas. And when talking with Mike Asti of West Virginia Now Sports on the episode that published Wednesday, he raved about his athleticism and what he could bring, but also raised significant concerns about what he is as a passer. And so this is a game, when we're talking about the defensive side of the ball, Utah's done a good job of taking the ball away, of getting some interceptions, this season. And yet there's still a lot of things that this group, the defensive secondary in particular, need to tighten up on. Obviously, the pass rush has been dynamic with John Henry Daly and generating over or close to 50 pressures so far through 4 games. You can count on the pressure, the pass rush to be effective in this one. But again, it's going to come down to the secondary, and I think tightening some things up. So to me, when we're talking about Jalen Henderson, the run game and the passing game, I think this is a big moment, a big week for this Utah defensive secondary to come out and play a really sharp game. I think that's going to be important because, Henderson hasn't proven much as a passer. There are a lot of concerns and doubts about his ability in that game, in that phase of the game. And I think you don't want to be the group to allow him to generate some momentum, build some confidence. You want to be the group that takes that away, that takes advantage of opportunities to take the ball away. And I think that's going to be a big key for this defensive secondary.
Absolutely. And there's going to be opportunities. Utah's tied for third nationally with 6 interceptions on the season. Jackson Benny has the 3 himself. There's still a lot of room for him to improve as far as technique goes and whatnot. But the secondary's been one of the bright spots. Another thing that I feel like I need to see is better angles and tackling in the secondary. The angle of pursuit is a little bit rough, and some of the tackles in the secondary. Also, you look at the UCLA game. That's where UCLA was able to score a touchdown. Tackling is where Texas Tech was able to get it going. They got a touchdown on their first possession due to some angles and some tackling. So need to see some of that cleaned up, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for the secondary to cause chaos, and Jalen Henderson, Utah's going to force him to throw it, and there's going to be opportunities with the Utah pass rush to get Jalen Henderson in position to make mistakes, and Utah has been excellent at capitalizing on that thus far this season.
Yeah, and again, to that point, I think a big key to forcing some of those mistakes to this point of the season has been Utah's defensive line getting pressure on the quarterbacks, on opposing quarterbacks, and I think that's going to be a big key this week as well. And obviously it starts on first and second downs by limiting success there, getting into those passing situations where that the quarterback is going to have to drop in the pocket, take some time to allow routes to develop. And, we saw John Henry Daly, make have his coming out party the last couple weeks with the plays that he's made. He's got a couple strip sacks, and he's just been really, really impressive. And I think this is another opportunity, not just for him, but for Utah's pass rush to really make a difference. And the key here is it's going to be about stopping the run, limiting the success on the ground to have that green light on third downs to get after it. So it all kind of plays a part, hand in hand together. On the defensive side of the ball, pass rush benefits the secondary benefits the pass rush, and it all gets back to stopping the run on early downs to have those opportunities. So, Bennett, I'd be curious just with this, given kind of the history between Kyle Whittingham and Rich Rodriguez, right? Going back to Rich Rod's time at Arizona, and even beyond that, I'm sure. But what do you make of this matchup? These two coaches being back on the field together. We all we all remember Rich Rod reactions and stuff. We all remember those fondly. There's been some doozies over the years. Certainly something I think a lot of Utah fans will be interested to see. But just what are your thoughts on the coaching matchup?
Yeah, I mean, for Rich Rod, this is one that he's going to be motivated to put some stuff on. He's had some success against Witt over the years. It's this is a moment for Rich Rod to say, hey, this season isn't a throwaway. We're here to win some football games. I know, who I'm going to the game with a West Virginia fan, and he's very much like, we already beat Pitt, and that's all that matters. Then we got crushed by. He's like, we got crushed by Kansas. We don't stand a chance, and it's like, I don't know. I don't think Rich Rod's singing that tune in the locker room. He's gonna find ways to take this personally. He's a good coach. He's gonna try to put his offensive hands all over this one, and we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. And again, with these two teams, and with Utah specifically, with West Virginia having the injury report that they do, with the guys all on that list, there's a lot of guys that could potentially be out of this game that could impact, how West Virginia calls plays, how they go about some of the things that they have done through the first 4 games. So I think, Morgan Scalley, Jason Beck also need to be on their P's and Q's, ready to adjust over the course of the game. So I think that'll be interesting as well. So, all right, we've talked about the matchups and sort of the importance of each matchup. I wanted to bring back the winning recipe. We missed it last week. We talked about the matchups, and this has been fun to talk about sort of what we view as the keys to a Utah win. So Bennett, I'll give you the mic first. Just what is the first key in your winning recipe for Utah this weekend?
Yeah, I think every team from here forward is going to try to replicate that blueprint that Texas Tech laid out for everyone else. That's you make Dampier throw the ball, and you might find success against Utah. That's what the thought is right now. Part of respecting the throw game is need to see Utah stretch the field vertically more often and not just horizontally. I think we do a good job of creating space on the outside, but that's a lot of air yards to get the ball to the outside. It feels like Utah is working really hard to get 4 or 5 yard gains. So when we look at our season average, for Utah's season average is 6.2 yards per pass attempt, 6.2 yards per pass attempt. That's 15th in the Big 12 and 107th in the country. So not great.
Not great.
Against Texas Tech, it took even a step further back. It was 4.2 yards. I'd like to see Utah stretch it a little more vertically and get to that 8 yards per pass attempt. Not asking for too much. That's about middle of the pack in the Big 12. And if Utah's able to do that, then you start to get some respect to the throw game, and you can't commit and sell out on the run. And I think that's where Utah's able to do more of what they want, have a nice balanced attack. So would like to see the field gets stretched more vertically and more often. My second point is better, and I already touched on this, is better tackling and pursuit angles. Again, Texas Tech, they opened it up because of bad angles, bad tackling. UCLA, their only touchdown of the game, bad angles, bad tackling. And we saw in some other moments that weren't necessarily touchdowns, but Utah got torched on yards after contact and yards after catch against Texas Tech specifically.
Yeah.
So need to see that improve. And then my final point is just want to see Utah come out pissed off and play like they just got punched in the mouth. Want to see them play physical and angry, and want them to take that out on West Virginia, because that's how you go on the road and win a football game.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And so for me, my winning recipe this weekend is pretty similar. I think it's important for Devin Dampier to get settled into this game, early and initially, right from the jump, get him settled in, get him comfortable. I want to see him executing at a much higher level from the jump, just to kind of piggyback off of your point about coming out pissed off. I think Devin Dampier needs to find an early rhythm. And there are things that Utah can do beyond the screen game. I think I want to see some things in the passing game beyond stretching defenses out horizontally behind the line of scrimmage. Start attacking the short and intermediate parts of the field, more often. Right, we talk so much about the vertical passing game and stretching the field, and I do think that's important. But another element is simply throwing the ball down the field, 5-10 yards a pop as well. Doing that more often will generate more YPA, and I think that is something that I'm interested to see. So I think my first big key in the winning recipe is getting Devin Dampier settled early, getting him into a rhythm, and establishing a passing game, a downfield passing game that gets these guys downfield. And I also want to see some yak. I want to see these guys get opportunities after the catch and creating yards after the catch. So that's something that I'm going to be paying close attention to. Key number 2 for me: win the turnover margin. And this is more about eliminating your own turnovers, right? Utah had 4 last week. They took the ball away twice. And if you eliminate a couple of those turnovers at the very least, you give yourself 2 opportunities to get it into scoring range, and that could have changed the entire complexity of that fourth quarter. So eliminate your turnovers, because that is going to impact so much more beyond just not putting the ball on the ground, right? And with what West Virginia is dealing with sort of the player availability, who's going to be playing in this game, who's not, I think the Utah defense, as long as they come, as you said, pissed off, ready to go, ready to punch some people in the mouth, this defense has shown week in, week out that they'll come to play. And I think this defense has a great matchup, and I trust them to continue to make plays. But I think this is important for the Utah offense to protect the ball, get back to playing efficient football, and capitalizing on those scoring opportunities. And then the final thing for me, this isn't a key to a win. Like if Utah doesn't score 14 first quarter points, I don't think it means like they're set to lose. But it would be nice, just again, to kind of piggyback off of your point of coming out strong. And I think getting a couple scores on the board in that first quarter, it would be nice to see, especially given the slow start last week. I think that would really do a lot for all of this entire conversation around Utah football right now, and what it's been the last couple of days. How we started this episode talking about needing to have a resounding bounce back performance, what it would mean for the fan base. I think getting out to a strong start, getting some points on the board in that first quarter, I think that is a huge key and would do so much for everybody involved here with Utah football. So I think that's going to be a key for me that I'm going to be paying attention to. And again, it just gets back to your point of coming out playing pissed off and like you want to punch some people in the mouth.
Absolutely. And To be determined if the winning recipe not happening last week had anything to do with the result on the field.
We'll see. We'll see. We are 0-1 when we don't talk about the winning recipe, and that's a record we obviously we're going to respect. That's why we brought it back. That's exactly why we brought it back. So yeah. All right. Let's wrap this one up, Bennett, with a quick run through over-unders and a score prediction. So we've got 10 over-unders for this game, and so let's run through it real quick. So over-under, Devin Dampier passing yards at 235 yards.
Over.
I'm going to go over slightly. Number 2, Ryan Davis receptions, 6.5.
Over.
I'm going to go under, actually. Because I want to see others involved, and I hope that's the case. So I'm going to say under. Next one, Wayshawn Parker carries, over under 15.
Over.
I will also go over. On that. Number 4, John Henry Daily sacks, 1.5.
He's going to get 1, but he might get 2. I'm going to keep it rolling with the overs.
I was hoping you would go under so I could go over. I will say a collective effort, and I'll stick with over. I think John Henry Daily gets 2. I think he gets 2 in this game. All right, Utah rushing yards total, over under 250 yards.
I'm going to go under, but not because we can't, but because there's going to be an emphasis on throwing the football.
I will go under as well. Yeah, I'm going to go under. Yeah. All right, number 7, West Virginia's leading rusher, over under 60 yards.
I'm going to go over.
I'm going to go under, but I think there will be multiple players with 40, 50 yards. Jalen Henderson for West Virginia, quarterback, over under 175 yards passing.
Going to go under.
I'm going to go over. Next one, combined Utah sacks, 3.5.
For as good as they are at sacking opposing quarterbacks, they're equally as bad at protecting their own, like worse than the conference. I'm going to go over 3.5 sacks.
I will also go over. And then total points in this game, 48.5. You going over or under?
Yeah, that's actually a really good over-under. I'm going to go over.
You're going over. All right, what's your score prediction?
31-20 Utah.
Ooh, 31-20. Okay. I'm going to go over as well, and I'm going to say 38-14 is what I see this game being.
I like it. I like anytime somebody's got something more optimistic than me. 31-20 with a garbage time touchdown, so we're clear.
And I could see that too. I think Jalen Henderson's going to go over 175 because I think there is going to be some garbage time. But I think, again, this is all going to be about Utah coming out with that sort of mentality that they need to. I think that's going to be the key to getting to not only getting to the win, but especially getting to this sort of margin of victory. So all of that, I think we all kind of understand where this team is at, what we want to see, and I think we all hope to see it this weekend.
Absolutely. Bounce back opportunity.
All right, man. Any final thoughts before we put a bow on this one?
For those traveling out to West Virginia, safe travels. Hope to see some of y'all in Morgantown. Can't wait to watch how this team reacts. not much more. I'm almost done talking about it at this point. This close.
This close. Yeah. Yeah, should be a good game. Should be a good turnout for Utah fans. It sounds like there's going to be a good number of Utah fans making the trip to Morgantown. So hopefully I'm trying to put something together, perhaps maybe a little get together Friday night. Maybe we do it Saturday. I don't know, but we'll try to figure that out between now and then. So again, appreciate everybody that's tuned into the Utah Blockcast this season. It's been great. It's been a lot of fun meeting everybody, and we'll be back at it soon with this dropping this episode, doing the space, and then probably post game stuff Saturday will be the next time that you hear from us. So appreciate everybody, and we'll chat soon.